And the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran could plunge the entire global economy into recession. Iran controls access to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important shipping routes for energy supply.
The Strait of Hormuz, a slender maritime corridor linking the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, holds unmatched significance in global energy commerce. Narrow in width, just 21 nautical miles at its most constricted point, it nevertheless channels approximately 1/5 of the world's oil supply, moving roughly 20 million barrels of crude and liquefied natural gas daily across its waters. This choke point's strategic value has made it a perennial focus of international diplomacy, military posturing, and commercial concern. Vessel transits here underpin not only the economies of Gulf states, but also major importers in Asia, Europe, and North America, rendering any disruption prone to ripple through global markets. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. Tensions around the Hormuz corridor have surged in recent weeks, triggered by a surprise joint U.S.-Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. On June 21st, U.S. forces bombarded 3 sites in Iran in an effort to degrade enrichment capabilities, provoking swift retaliation from Tehran, which launched missiles at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar 2 days later. Amidst this exchange, hardline elements within Iran's parliament moved to formalize threats to close the strait, passing a symbolic resolution endorsing its blockade should Western pressure continue. Although such parliamentary decrees carry no binding power over the Islamic Republic's security apparatus, they reflect the prevailing mood among those advocating maximalist responses to external coercion. Beyond parliamentary posturing, U.S. intelligence agencies disclosed that Iran had actively prepared to mine the strait last month, loading sea mines aboard vessels and priming them for deployment. Had these mines been emplaced, they could have severed Gulf shipping lanes for weeks, if not months, causing a global energy crisis. While U.S. sources caution the mining preparations may have been a feint, the revelation alone has compelled NATO and allied navies to heighten surveillance and mine countermeasure readiness in the region. Such kinetic preparations underscore how Iran's asymmetric toolkit spans more than missile and naval demonstrations. Commercial operators are already reacting to the heightened risk environment. Maritime agencies have issued advisories urging vessels to steer clear of Iranian waters surrounding the strait, instead hugging the Omani coastline where local security forces have proven more predictable. Shipmasters report that insurance underwriters have slapped surcharges on hull and war risk policies for Gulf transits, with premiums rising by as much as 25% in recent weeks. Consequently, many shipping lines are considering detours around the Cape of Good Hope, a route adding some 7,000 nautical miles and up to 2 additional weeks to voyages, but offering sanctuary from potential interdiction. Electronic warfare threats are compounding navigational challenges. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations UKMTO Center has warned of AIS jamming and other electronic interference emanating from vessels operating near Iran's coast, a tactic that masks ship identities and positions from commercial and naval trackers alike. Mariners describe sudden blacking out of automated identification systems as they pass through the narrow corridor, forcing crews to rely on manual plotting and visual lookout. Such interference not only jeopardizes safety at sea, but also hinders multinational task forces' efforts to monitor and respond to emergent threats. In parallel, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy IRGCN has intensified interdiction training exercises, employing small, fast attack craft and helicopters to simulate rapid boarding operations against merchantmen. These drills appear designed to reinforce Tehran's long-standing claim that it can enforce sovereignty over its territorial waters at will, even against ships flying neutral or friendly flags. Last year's seizure of a Portuguese-flagged vessel underscored this capability, when IRGCN helicopters and gunboats compelled the crew to divert into Iranian ports under pretext of security violations. The perturbations in Hormuz have sparked broader strategic ripples. The U.S. Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain, has increased ship patrols in the northern Arabian Sea, coordinating with allied navies to maintain a continuous presence near the strait's approaches. Pentagon announcements cite voluntary departure orders for dependents of military personnel across the region, signifying concern over potential escalation into open hostilities. Meanwhile, European Union diplomatic channels are scrambling to mediate a de-escalation, warning all parties of the dangers of miscalculation in such a congested, high-stakes theater. Energy markets have responded sharply to the specter of a Hormuz crisis. Goldman Sachs analysts project that even a temporary halving of oil flows through the strait for a single month could push Brent crude prices toward $110 per barrel, before moderating to around $95 by year-end. Their scenario assumes an immediate short-term shortage of some 1.75 million barrels per day in Iranian production, followed by gradual recovery. Such a supply shock would reverberate through consumer economies, translating into higher gasoline, diesel, and heating fuel costs worldwide. For Gulf states, the stakes are existential. Oil-rich kingdoms from Saudi Arabia to the United Arab Emirates rely on Hormuz as their principal export conduit. Closure would deprive them of essential revenue streams, potentially crippling sovereign budgets and public spending programs. Iran itself, despite its bellicose rhetoric, is acutely aware of this mutual vulnerability. Nearly 90% of its oil exports also transit the waterway. A full closure would inflict as much pain on Tehran's coffers as on its adversaries, making a permanent blockade an unlikely policy choice. Geographically, the strait's complexity compounds political risk. The waterway is flanked by shallow shoals and narrow shipping channels, forcing tankers and cargo vessels into tight formations as they transit in opposite directions. This choreography leaves scant room for maneuver during emergencies or hostile encounters. In such constrained waters, a single accident, be it a mining incident, collision under electronic jamming, or misidentified craft, could cascade into a multi-vessel pileup, releasing oil into the fragile Gulf ecosystem. Amid these tensions, alternative energy corridors are gaining renewed emphasis. Overland pipelines such as the Arabian Pipeline Company's line to Yanbu on the Red Sea and the Iraq-Jordan pipeline to Aqaba offer bypass routes, but their combined capacity remains limited to less than 3 million barrels per day, far short of Hormuz's throughput. Proposals to expand these routes face both technical and political hurdles, ranging from securing transit rights across multiple sovereign territories to financing the necessary infrastructure upgrades. Diplomatically, China's position is pivotal. As the largest importer of Gulf oil, Beijing has urged restraint from all sides, leveraging its deep trade ties with Iran to discourage a full-blown blockade. Yet analysts note that China's recent diversification, boosting purchases from Russia, Saudi Arabia, and West African producers, alongside expanded strategic oil reserves, has lessened its immediate dependence on Hormuz transit. Beijing's quiet mediation efforts aim to preserve uninterrupted supply without overtly siding in the US-Iran confrontation. The legal dimension adds another layer of complexity. Under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea UNCLOS, the strait qualifies as an international strait, guaranteeing the right of transit passage even through territorial waters of bordering states. Tehran contests aspects of this regime, citing security prerogatives and historical claims over its adjacent seascape. US and European naval forces, in turn, routinely conduct freedom of navigation operations (FONOPs) to reaffirm these passage rights, risking near-miss confrontations with IRGCN vessels. Regional actors beyond Iran and the US are also recalibrating. Oman, which controls the southern flank of the strait, has offered to host enhanced maritime coordination centers, positioning itself as a neutral broker and safe harbor for distressed ships. Conversely, GCC Gulf Cooperation Council states have accelerated procurement of air and naval defense systems to deter any spillover from Persian Gulf combat scenarios into their own waters. Non-state actors have not been idle. Houthi rebels in Yemen have intermittently struck commercial shipping in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, raising concerns that such tactics could migrate toward Hormuz's approaches if the main conflict intensifies. Although current Houthi operations focus on disrupting Saudi-led coalitions in Yemen, the group's rhetoric champions solidarity with Iran's resistance axis, suggesting potential expansion of maritime harassment against vessels linked to US or Israeli interests. Economic repercussions extend beyond oil. The strait's closure, or even the credible threat of one, would sharply elevate freight costs across all seaborne commodities shipped from Far East manufacturing hubs to Europe and the Americas. Higher freight rates feed into consumer inflation, especially for goods with tight just-in-time supply chains. Shippers are now tacking contingency clauses into contracts, specifying compensation for delays incurred by mandatory detours, while ports in South Asia and Africa are marketing themselves as alternative hubs for transshipment. Despite the clamor, full closure remains improbable. Intelligence assessments suggest that Iran lacks the mine clearing and maritime infrastructure to sustain a prolonged blockade without inviting crippling retaliation. Moreover, Tehran's leadership is wary of triggering a grand coalition of Western and regional navies that could impose a more severe embargo against Iranian oil exports or even target offshore facilities. Instead, Iran seems to favor calibrated diplomatic brinkmanship, using the specter of Hormuz closure as leverage to extract concessions, whether in sanctions relief, nuclear negotiations, or regional security dialogues. Western capitals, in turn, are weighing a mixture of deterrence and engagement, dispatching envoys to Oman, Kuwait, and Iraq to explore back-channel diplomacy aimed at diffusing the standoff. Looking ahead, the Strait's dynamics may hinge on several factors: the tempo of US-Iran back-channel talks on nuclear and missile issues, the resilience of global energy markets to absorb short-term shocks, and the degree of unity among Gulf Arab states in responding to shared vulnerabilities. Should diplomatic breakthroughs falter and military incidents multiply, the risk of miscalculation in the narrow waters of Hormuz could spiral, compelling a reactive surge in both Western and regional military deployments. In the meantime, commercial and naval stakeholders must navigate the evolving risk landscape with a blend of prudence and preparedness. Vessel operators are intensifying bridge team training for asymmetric threats, augmenting watch rotations to detect small craft approaches, and reinforcing critical equipment against electronic interference. Navies are exercising mine clearance drills, rehearsing medical evacuations, and refining rules of engagement to prevent inadvertent escalation from minor clashes. The Strait of Hormuz remains emblematic of the intricate dance between commerce, security, and geopolitics. Its narrow span belies the vast array of interests, national, corporate, and civilian, that converge upon its turquoise waters daily. While outright closure would trigger a global crisis, the ongoing maneuvers around its shores illustrate how even latent threats can send shockwaves through markets, militaries, and diplomatic corridors alike. For the moment, the corridor flows, but under a tense watch that underscores the persistent fragility of this critical artery of global trade. A sudden collision between two oil tankers near the entrance to the strait on June 17th underscored the precariousness of maritime traffic in the region. The UAE Coast Guard reported that the vessels struck one another approximately 24 nautical miles off Khor-Fakkan, igniting fires but miraculously causing no spill or casualties. This accident unfolded against a backdrop of persistent electronic interference that has repeatedly blinded navigation systems, forcing crews to depend on manual plotting and visual lookout in waters already choked with traffic and tension. In the aftermath, the evacuated crew members were airlifted to safety, yet the incident reignited concerns about the strait's susceptibility not only to deliberate acts of sabotage, but also to tragic misjudgments amid a high-alert environment. Environmentalists warned that a more severe accident could unleash catastrophic oil pollution, imperiling coral reefs and fisheries that sustain coastal communities along both the Iranian and Omani shores. As military maneuvers intensified, so too did the cost of transiting the strait. In the week following the joint US-Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites, war risk insurance premiums for vessels bound for the Gulf leaped from roughly 0.2 to 0.3% of the ship's value to as much as 0.5%. By late June, a modest easing of hostilities allowed premiums to recede to between 0.35 and 0.45%, yet this remained well above pre-crisis levels. Analysts at major underwriting firms cautioned that even short-lived spikes in premium rates could inflate freight costs by tens of thousands of dollars per voyage, pressuring tight delivery schedules and eroding the narrow margins of energy traders. This roller coaster insurance environment has prompted some ship owners to demand compensation clauses for rerouting or delay, while reinsurers reassess the collateral risks of a wider conflagration. Commercial traffic near Hormuz has taken to broadcasting unorthodox mileage markers and nationality messages in a bid to deter potential attackers. Data from the maritime analytics firm Windward revealed that since the outbreak of hostilities, Dozens of vessels have transmitted false national identities or coded messages over AIS channels, hoping to escape targeting by fast attack craft or drone swarms operating under Iran's Revolutionary Guard flag. By masquerading as ships from neutral or Gulf Cooperation Council states, merchant captains aim to reduce the chance of being singled out, even as such stratagems complicate multinational monitoring efforts. These electronic masquerades, while ingenious, introduce new hazards. Naval forces tracking suspicious contacts may misinterpret legitimate merchantmen as hostile actors, heightening the risk of miscalculation. Europe's answer to the Hormuz tensions has crystallized in the form of the European Maritime Awareness in the Strait of Hormuz mission EMISO and its military counterpart Operation Agenor. Headquartered at the French naval base in Abu Dhabi, EMISO brings together 9 European nations, among them France, Italy, and Denmark, to share intelligence, coordinate diplomatic outreach, and dispatch patrol vessels and reconnaissance aircraft to the Gulf. Under Agenor, a rotating task force of frigates and mine countermeasure ships has conducted joint exercises in mine detection and fast attack craft interdiction, honing skills in asymmetric environments. This Franco-led initiative complements U.S. Fifth Fleet operations, demonstrating a rare European willingness to project hard power in defense of international maritime law, and underscores the widening scope of coalition partners invested in the strait's stability. Behind the scenes, the U.S. military has quietly reconfigured its regional posture to gird against any spillover from the Israel-Iran clash. Satellite imagery and Pentagon briefings reveal that the USS Nimitz carrier strike group was supplemented in July by the USS Carl Vinson, while additional B-52 bombers and F-22 fighters streamed into bases from Diego Garcia to Al Udeid. Moreover, high-altitude surveillance via MQ-9 Reaper drones has surged over the Gulf of Oman, feeding live feeds to U.S. Central Command and allied navies. These deployments serve dual purposes: deterring any Iranian adventure and assuring commercial shippers that a formidable shield of air power and naval firepower looms over their passage. Yet this robust buildup carries its own gamble. Each new asset increases the choreography of maneuvers in constrained waters, where a single misinterpreted radar signature or wrong-headed maneuver could trigger confrontation. The turmoil in Hormuz has rippled far beyond oil markets, touching agricultural exports and broader trade flows. India, heavily reliant on Gulf routes for its basmati rice shipments, has seen payment delays stretch to 8 months as banks grow wary of financing cargoes destined for Tehran, while Pakistani exporters quietly exploit barter deals, exchanging rice for crude oil and other goods, to maintain market share in Iran. New Delhi's Commerce Ministry warns that higher freight rates and surging insurance premiums could drive up rice prices in Middle Eastern markets by 15%, jeopardizing an export sector valued at over Rs6,000 crore annually. These shifts underscore how a crisis in a narrow waterway can cascade into food security questions and geopolitical realignments in distant capitals. Meanwhile, the liquefied natural gas LNG trade is also navigating choppy waters. Japan's Mitsui OSK Lines, for example, has maintained its Gulf LNG routes but admitted that options for diversion are scant, given the paucity of Red Sea or Suez Canal alternatives capable of absorbing the world's largest LNG carriers. The European Union is reportedly in discussions to lift sanctions on specialized insurance for LNG vessels, recognizing that higher premiums could inflate energy costs for consumers during the Northern Hemisphere's winter heating season. As LNG increasingly underpins power grids across Asia and Europe, any protracted disruption in Hormuz risks sending ripple shocks through electricity markets and national energy planning. Given these vulnerabilities, regional oil producers have accelerated investments in pipelines and storage facilities that bypass the strait. Saudi Aramco's East-West pipeline, which runs 746 miles from Abqaiq on the Gulf Coast to Yanbu on the Red Sea, boasts a nominal capacity of 5 million barrels per day and was temporarily expanded to 7 million in 2019 to mitigate Bab al-Mandeb disruptions. Likewise, the UAE's Abu Dhabi Fujairah line can carry 1.6 million barrels daily into massive storage caverns capable of holding over 70 million barrels. Together, these arteries provide roughly 6.6 million barrels of alternative export capacity, though they fall well short of the 20 million barrels that transit Hormuz each day. The IEA estimates that total bypass pipeline capacity in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iraq aggregates to around 4.2 million barrels per day, highlighting the region's continued dependency on the strait. Despite the drumbeat of brinkmanship, most analysts agree a full closure remains far-fetched. Iran's own hydrocarbon revenues, 90% of which rely on seaborne exports, would crater under a prolonged blockade, and Tehran's nascent export terminal at Jask lacks the throughput to compensate. Meanwhile, global oil markets have shown a measure of resilience. Strategic petroleum reserves stand ready for release, and higher output from U.S. shale basins and Brazilian offshore fields offers additional backstop supply. Yet every fresh threat, accident, or act of interference serves as a stark reminder that the Strait of Hormuz remains more than a simple sea lane. It is a barometer of international tensions and a fulcrum upon which the stability of energy markets and maritime security continues to pivot. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us. What are your thoughts on the Strait of Hormuz? What do you expect happens next? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.